Let's start. This session is from the logistic cluster, and it's the production logistic cluster, mainly just to go for this one. So the manufacturing cluster for logistics, we concern ourselves with production logistic issues and research and supply chain, production supply chain. So we have members from Volvo Cars, Scania, KTH, Rice, Chalmers, Ecupac, Schenker Logistics, but we're looking forward to if more members want to join the cluster as active members. And contact me or Lena Palm, who's the chairman for the cluster. We have a prioritized research agenda within the production, logistics and supply chain areas, where we research, for example, efficient and sustainable material flows, material handling and packaging, material in production, planning and control. The hot topics right now are, for example, supply chain 4.0, or maybe we should call it 5.0, resilient and distortion and material shortages and circular production systems. And we will address this, some of this today. So we will start with Niclas Ohlsson from TSS, and then we will have Nils and Lennart, and then Jannike and Masoud will take us down to the lab downstairs. So this is the last part, will be a go and see session. Okay, so let's start with Niclas.
Thank you.
We could I didn't get this to
I will not use this page now. Huh. Okay, nice to see all of you. Not sure who you are and what background you have and how I can relate to you, which I would like to do. So I thought I would bring you to my space because that I have control of. I'm glad to share my basics. A couple of years ago, a young girl came to a clinic in Paris. It was part of a clinical trial for oncology diseases, and it was her last chance of treating cancer. And she came to the hospital, and the doctor fetched the drug that she was going to take. And as part of the control process, the doctor or nurse saw that has been an alarm, that there was a risk that the drug has been compromised. The good thing was that they had recently changed to a digital real-time system. So the experts, being the ones that could determine if the drug has been damaged too much or not, was instantly notified. And they called from UK, go in, analyze the data and other data to support the integrity of the drug, and concluded within 30 minutes that the drug was safe to dispatch. And the drug was given to the girl. And this was the day before Christmas, was in the afternoon of the 23rd of December. And the drug helped, and she is alive. Just 1 year before that, they would not have been able to release the drug. And if they can't release the drug, they can't give the drug to her. And that would have taken 1 or 2 weeks, and that would have been too late for that girl. So what I do is helping the pharma industry to ensure that they can deliver a safe drug to every patient. May it be you, may it be your relatives or a friend. Drugs are sensitive, regardless if they're in clinical trial. Even the over-counter drugs are sensitive, and they degrade mainly as a function of time and temperature, just on the light and so discrete events when it freezes and so on. And as we as humans are not built to detect if the drug may be correct or not, we need to have supporting system to prove that they are in right condition. On the milk, we can smell, we can taste. We have learned that over many, many years. But with drugs, we as consumers or doctors as consumers, they have limited ability without external evidence that the integrity of the drug is safe. So we provide software solutions and hardware solutions to enable the pharma industry to be compliant. And they are driven by the regulatory bodies like FDA, European pharma regulations, and Swedish, and so on, all over the world. The market, which I have too little part of, is fairly large. 100 million shipments per year at least. The value is 78 billions. There is a loss of 35 billions per year, and 25% of all vaccines are damaged. So it's a lot of waste in the supply chain. And this is the waste we are aware about. There are drugs, of course, through a reasonable reliability and a certain perspective, drugs that actually slip through the control network and are given and are then not as effective as they should be. And if you take drugs that are not effective, you have other cost and waste in that industry. About 34 billions are spent on handling temperature excursions. So it's not a very well-functional ecosystem or well-functional supply chain. The ecosystem itself is a rather complex system. It's in silos. If you look from an active pharma ingredients is produced somewhere in the world, it's shipped to a manufacturing site. It is moved around in partially controlled environment. It's moved further to packaging. It's distributed to a distribution center. It's further by other organizations, other people distributed to the point of sale or point of delivery, where either doctor, nurses, or we as a consumer handle the drugs. I bet that many of you have never read what it says on the label that you have. Most of you know that the milk should be stored in the fridge. You know that if you leave it too long on the table in the summer, the expiry date will not work. But you have no clue of the tablets. You don't even know when they expire, and many of you. And many of you save it actually in the bathroom with sunshine on, or you leave it in the car during the summer, reaching 40, 50 degrees in the boat, and so on. So there are so many different stakeholders involved in the supply chain that one sometimes wonder if this is ever going to work. But let's control the things we can control. And we are primarily focused on primary distribution, secondary distribution, and commercial. We are doing end-to-end in clinical studies, meaning from manufacturing to dispatching on site. And we also do monitoring of clinical sites or pharmacies where drugs are stored. But maybe the weakest spot is in our home. So you can at least educate yourself on the drugs you have and where you store them and when they expire, because they degrade. And if you think you take 10 milligram, you maybe take 0 or only 4 milligram of the drug. And sometimes they should be in the fridge, and when you have started to use it, should be saved in the room temperature. So read the detailed information on the leaflet. And the pharmacist will not always know. You can pick something up that should not freeze in the middle of the winter, and it's -20 outside. And when you come home, you read, do not freeze. And then you can think, was it wise to take the long walk home with the bag, with the drug in your basket? So regulation is good. Regulation is important. Everything started in late 80s when UPS started to wonder if it's matter if you had white or brown trucks when you ship things. No one thought they had a problem. There is a large pharma company here, very close to us, that didn't do any temperature monitoring because they couldn't have any problem. And there was a lot of tablets for the stomach, and they are so robust. But this is explored, and today everybody must monitor. And if I look at the data, despite the advancement in shipping container, in handling services, in warehouse handover, there are still temperature excursions happening. So for sure it happened 30 years ago when it started. So this regulatory not only regulates the pharma companies or the handler of the drug, it also indirectly regulates my business. So I'm put under a lot of constraints, which makes it not a creative IT.com company where you can do whatever you want and release features on a daily basis. I spend more time on proving that the things I develop actually work than develop them in the beginning. So there is a lot of slowness in my business. But it's also a matter of trust. And before the pandemic, we carried the primary record, as it's called, the one of the evidence elements, like a ownership or a testimony to a drug on these devices, and we transfer them to the cloud, and people could release based on that information. But due to the trust issue that is so sensitive information on the logger, what drug has been going where and under what temperature, everybody's very scared about anyone else getting hold of this. So you ended up in a linear economy where the drugs go in one direction and the information that goes with it goes there, and then you should just try and kill it more or less, unless you can keep it within your own ecosystem or supply chain. So we basically sold the hardware. It was used once and then was destroyed as a principle. I didn't believe in that, so I gathered, because we also get the return for destruction, but I didn't destroy them, so I harvest this. I had a big building with over-engineered loggers, and then in December 2019 we moved to a different location, and then I had to give up and destroy all these assets that I thought it was, but started to collect new one in the new building. Then 3 months later, the pandemic happened. And as many of you know, many of you probably more than I, the pandemic came with many things. The remote aspect was not an issue for us, but the shortage of electronics that came for different reasons. First of all, the miscalculation in demands from the car industry that keep having large bookings of electronics. And then the growth of consumers needing electronics for PCs at home, for rising desks at home, for other kind of equipment. So there was a consumer bomb on electronics that all of you that knows about wafer industry, so they're working with very little margins of adapting to that. So the system got completely jammed with orders. And when you get jammed, the prices go up, and the one that screams the hardest gets the components. So what happened for me? Well, first of all, I couldn't get components because other nations sent their president or their foreign minister to Taiwan and said, if you're going to exist after the pandemic, make sure the wafers go to Germany or to USA. And USA was making US great again. So even if we were buying from US, we were not getting electronics from those, not even 10% sensitive, they were going to the US market. Everyone was looking after themselves. My problem was that I'm a really small company. I have no one in procurement. I've outsourced the production to a company in Sweden that do the PCBAs, they're putting the components on the chip. They buy from a distributor, they buy sometimes from another distributor, they buy a component from someone, and down the drain somewhere there is a wafer producer. And of course, I was in the medical space. I can start argue for I should have medical priority. And I started to hunt all the way to the wafer manufacturer and said, I need components. I have medical priorities. And they say, TSS who? Because I had no relationship in the supply chain or in my supply chain. I was a nobody. So what we did on the pandemic, or what I spent 50% of my time with, was building relationships to existing supply chain. I managed to buy 2 ways down, buying components, giving them to another assembler or mounting company, which put their antenna on it. I had to buy it back for a higher price, and then I had to give it to my PCBA EMS producer. So it was really complicated, but that was not enough. I also needed to do second sourcing, and everybody could say, yeah, well, that's good. A brake is a brake, or a lamp is a lamp. But these are control devices. They've been validated. I have all this evidence that they actually work under all these conditions. I should have done 2-3 years long-term studies so that there are no drifting on the sensors and so on. I had to do that, qualify the new supplier, design in new components, and then I needed to manufacture them, test them, and validate them in order to supply the survey. And that we did for a long time. In certain aspects, we were really successful. The citizens in Japan, I called the CEO and said, I have a problem and you have a problem because your mother may not be able to get the medicine. He sold me oscillators so I could be a reseller of them, because I asked for 2 minutes on their fab line and just take whatever it comes there and take it to me Sweden. So I got so many oscillators. In other parts, I didn't get anything else. The supply chain also changed during the pandemic, because if you're afraid that you can't get things forward and you're afraid you're going to run out them, you start doing the building inventory. And that was also for the pharma industry. They're moving their inventory closer to the market, so it shouldn't be a shortage. And that also disrupted the whole ecosystem, a complete mess. So suddenly, in all this, and I've probably spoken of this one. Yeah. Suddenly, in the need of actually being able to deliver pharma products, disruption helped me to drive change. Suddenly, companies that have said, we will never allow you to refurbish, even though they have sustainability goals for 10, 15 years, you can't refurbish, you can't reuse, we don't accept it. Everybody say, we accept that you take them back, that you change the tiers and put new fuel in the car, and that I can rent it again. So we changed our business model from selling hardware. We call it now a hardware as a service, but it's really a subscription on data streams. So we lend out the hardware to our customers. And that make a completely different change in many dimensions. And it's quite fascinating that something that was so terrible for so many people actually means something good for generations to come, because we are now much more sustainable. We have done initial calculations on, because one could say, okay, how do you know it's more sustainable? Take it back, you change battery, you put new plastic on it, you calibrate it again, and so on. With a quick, rough estimate, producing a new sensor, I can send out a logger about and take it back 30 times until I have created the same carbon footprint. So the equation is very easy because there are so much unique raw material, there's so much energy consumed when I actually manufacture the components and assemble them on the PCBA, that the footprint of actually returning to Sweden is so little. So without any machine learning or without any Bayesian statistics, it was very simple to conclude that the pandemic gave me as a company a much more sustainable business model. Not only did it give me that, it gave my customer a lower cost because now we are recycling. I have lower cost. I can reduce the price to that. Thirdly, it was also good, even though I reduced the price and even though I have increased of 35% on my boom list for the production, I was still making more money. We had dreamt about that for 15 years, but it took a pandemic to take the shift. And it doesn't only support my sustainability goals, it also support the pharma sustainability goals. So the magic TSS did was only to recognize it. But of course, having done that shift is not enough. Of course, we now are on a different level on our carbon footprint. Now we would like to start to work with that. And there are, of course, me extending my fleet into the feed of my customer. I need to become more efficient and smarter in knowing where items are and when to collect them. So we have built, we had already before that built machine learning models for detecting when customers need to order, but we're also utilizing that software now to recognize when we should collect at certain places. And we have built onto that, so it's the collection of loggers, because there might be one place it may come hundreds or 1,000 a day at the destination, other places might come one every month. And how do we optimize the timing for collecting them? We want to reduce the fleet to a minimum, but we would like to bring in both the sustainability and the economics in that, because it's, of course, it's better to collect 2 loggers at one time than 1 logger, and so on and so forth. So today we have 2 complete new services: inventory management and reverse logistics that we offer. And what do we do going forward? I should finish 10:2, correct? Yeah, okay. Well, the modeling on how sustainable we are is, of course, not good enough from an industrial or academic perspective. So we are working more on see how we can model the carbon footprint more in details. And then when we understand how we can model that, build it in even further into our models for knowing when to ship and when to collect. That is our part. Having taken this step and starting to learn these principles for how to do things, the really big carbon footprint is not the loggers going around with the pharma drugs. The really carbon footprint is all the packaging and all the drugs being shipped in different modes all over the world. But as we are tracking and trace all shipment, and as we are now working with our customers to get all the information that defines the carbon footprint, we can then start to work with them, modeling their carbon footprint, and not only drive what we have done in the past, more cost-effective initiatives, reducing the box because we have over-engineered the box, and so on and so forth. We are building models for offering our customers to get this modeling of the carbon footprint. Further, I always found that it was good and clever only be in Sweden because I'm a software company. No, I have a fleet in more than 100 countries in the world. Then one can start to think, how should I be geographically located in order to optimize this further? Is it still wise for me to centralize everything to Sweden? Or is it better for me to have one foot in Asia, one foot in US, and build minor ecosystems? So that is also work that we are going to continue with. So the sense of something important is that circular is a win-win service that no one loses. And it only takes a change of a mindset. Or element. That's it.
Yeah, great work. We are, of course, very interested in see if we can be circular on some of the electrical components on the truck and so on. The main obstacle we have is how do we quality assure or reliability questions when we reuse that. So have you done any work on that?
Yeah. So what I do, I disassemble them down to the PCA level I get them into. So I remove the caps link and I remove the battery. Then I feed them in. I put on the firmware. I apply my control mechanisms. I calibrate each logger as well. So to verify that the temperature is correct, which is both a functional and performance test. And then I also do a configuration which also includes certain number of test elements that are built in. So we have QC steps through our assembly line. And by that we filter it.
This is quite simple. Nice type of remanufacturing. So you, as I understood it when I visited it, you do the same testing as you would do on a new product.
Yeah. But having said that, we have also actually, because we for sustainability reason, we changed the plastic on one of the loggers. And that was super good for environment. The problem is it was so hard to track. So we have actually also qualified without replacing casing and battery. And the functional QC we can do in any way. The problem we have with battery, but that we have done on calculations. But I could easily add on option inspection of the PCBA to see that detect abnormalities and damages.
And these loggers are quite small. And the electronics we have looked, I talked to another electronic manufacturing in the area to supply to a couple of you guys. Could you manufacture this part? Yeah, we could, but we don't. But our customers who owns that, they prefer to sell a new one so far. So there are technical opportunities.
And as they are all capsular as well, they're well protected, not sitting in opening. So through the recycling back, they're still isolated. If you deassemble a car, take out something and ship it, you have a sensitive situation. Shipping and
And it's typically 10 years until you get it.
Yeah. Yeah, time to get them back is that's a challenge as well. Even if it's end of life, it's still quite some time to improve the speed you can get it back from that location somewhere in the world. Because of course, the smaller fleet I have, the more sustainable I am. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you for